ma'am.
Thank you.
There you right? Alright. Hello everybody, my name's eBay. What I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to show you how to apply thermal paste onto a central processing unit inside of a computer. A central processing unit is basically the brains of a computer. It's what makes everything work. Everything from computers to laptops to your cell phones that you hold in your hands all have central processing units in them. And today I'm going to show you how to put the paste on it that actually keeps it cool. So the reason why you would actually change the thermal paste on a computer is with your desktop models you have to actually clean them every so often to get all the dust and everything out of them, because the fans and stuff actually catch dust and it gets backed up in there real bad. So you want to actually take all the pieces out of the computer in order to wipe it all down and spray it down with canned air, get all the dust and the foam and everything out of it, and properly clean it. Well, while you're doing that, you actually have to take off some of the pieces that sit on top of the CPU. And when you take off the pieces that sit on top of the CPU, you actually have to reapply the thermal paste back on it before you put the computer back together. The reason for the thermal paste is a CPU, since it's the brains, it actually burns a lot of heat. And that heat actually escapes out of it. And if it has too much heat, it causes the CPU to fry, and it can also cause parts on the motherboard to fry and things to stop working. And ultimately, you have a computer that you spent good money for that is now a dud. On top of the central processing unit, what you have is you normally have a fan that keeps it cool along with a heat sink. The heat sink in this computer right here, if you see, is actually copper. Most computers that you see today, because this is an older model, don't have copper heat sinks. They actually have your aluminum alloy fin heat sinks. So what you want to do is you actually want to remove the heat sink. So this one right here has two little green clips, and the way to get green clips off of it is to actually squeeze the side of it. And when you squeeze the side of it, the green clip actually comes right out. And it has two of them that holds that heat sink in place. So once we get these out, okay, we just set those off to the side. And then the heat sink just has a little clip over here to the side. You just pull it out, and the heat sink, as you see, just comes right off. Normally, the CPU would not come out with the heat sink, but because we had just recently cleaned this computer and just put new thermal paste on it, the CPU actually did come out with it. The CPU has a bunch of little pins, so when you're actually handling it, you want to be very, very, very careful with it.
Thank you.
So if you do have this issue where the CPU comes out onto the bottom of the heatsink, you want to be very careful with it. You would actually want to wear gloves while handling this equipment, and you want to be very careful with the heatsink as you're using it. Squeezing it on the side, dropping it, anything like that, to where these fins are pushed closer together than what they were pre-manufactured, causes the heat not to escape properly from the CPU, and will actually cause it to heat up faster. So you just want to give it a little twist or a little tug very gently, being very careful not to touch any of the pins that are on the back, because those pins are very, very fragile, and any type of movement or anything like that can bend those pins very easily. So once you got that taken off, normally it would look like this after you've taken the heatsink off. Your CPU would still be sitting down there in the bottom. So you would be very, very gentle and pull the CPU out. You would normally have an electromagnetic, what's it called, electromagnetic mat right here to set it on top of. Because these parts use electricity, some of them could still have some residual electricity on them. You would also be wearing an electromagnetic bracelet that would be put to the side that would keep you from getting shocked if you were using it. Like I said, because this is an older computer, I am not wearing those things at the moment. So at this point in time, what we would do is we would take some isopropyl alcohol and a very, very, very soft rag, and we would wipe all of this off. Okay. Once we wiped the thermal paste off of the CPU, we would also wipe the thermal paste off of the heatsink. Cleaning it assures that when we reapply it, that when the bead is put on there, that it all spreads out evenly. There are a couple different ways to apply thermal paste. Right now we're going to be using TG7 thermal grease. There are a couple different ones out there. There's some that conduct electricity and some that do not. This one is one that does not. There are two different methods that I prefer to use, but there are, like I said, a couple of different ones. The first one is a pea drop size of thermal paste. The pea drop size directly in the middle of the CPU. So after you would clean everything off, you would set the CPU back inside of the holder here. And then you would apply a very small, minute amount. We call it a pea drop because it literally looks like a pea drop. So it's very small. So after you've done that, you would reseat your heat sink. When the heat sink is reset, what it does is it, once it heats up and it sits down in there properly, it's going to cause that pea drop size to actually spread out. It's going to spread out evenly into a circular disc. What that thermal paste does is it actually causes the entire CPU to cool at a rate that is all the same on all sides. Whereas if you didn't apply the thermal paste, certain corners would get hotter than others, certain cores would fry faster than others. Another method you can use is a line drop method. You just take a little line, put it down straight down the middle, and then you set the heat sink on there and it spreads out properly. You don't want to use too little because too little will make it too hot, and you don't want to use too much because too much will cause it to spill over the sides. And if it gets onto the motherboard and it has electrical conducting components in it, it can cause the motherboard to fry. So in conclusion, that is how you apply thermal paste to a CPU.